Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Jobin, and you are listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. This podcast is dedicated to helping family caregivers in Ontario. Through expert tips and resources, you will gain knowledge and validation for the ups and downs that come with caregiving. More importantly, you'll learn that you're not alone. It's so important to take this time for yourself. We're glad you're here. Today, we're joined by Ngozi Iroanyah, a PhD student at York University specializing in health policy and equity studies. Her research focuses on how dementia policy impacts racialized and ethno-culturally diverse seniors in Canada. Ngozi is a dedicated caregiver for her father, Felix, who has been living with dementia since 2008, and she has been his advocate for access to quality care. With over 15 years of experience in health research and administration, she's worked both in Canada and abroad, including with the Alzheimer's Society of Canada and the Dementia Policy Unit. Ngozi brings a diverse perspective to today's episode, as both a caregiver for her father with dementia and a professional researcher. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Michelle.
We're really excited to talk to you today because for this program, what we really hope to do is create the space for caregivers in Ontario and everywhere, really, so that they can perhaps find a connection with someone where their story feels seen and heard. And we really are appreciating your personal and professional perspective on today's topic. So I wanted to sort of dive in and talk a little bit more about the work that you do. You have been working with the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario since November of 2023. Can you share us a little bit about the organization's mission and the kinds of programs available to caregivers in Ontario through them?
Yes, absolutely. So the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario, well, I'm going to take a step back actually and talk about the Alzheimer's Society across the country, because I think that's going to provide a little bit more information for our listeners, as well as some options and supports for them. So the Alzheimer's Society across the country, we have provincial societies throughout. So we have Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, etc. And some of the bigger provinces have what's called local societies. So in the case of Ontario, we have the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario, and then we have the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto, Peel, Windsor, etc. Now we have the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. So we have a national Alzheimer's Society, and then we have provincial ones, and then we have local ones. And at each step are different responsibilities and services provided for people living with dementia. So at the national level, the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, its main engine is really research-based, as well as resource development. So educational materials, campaigning, fundraising, etc., but mainly research is the hub. Within each provincial society, the ones that have a big population, so that's BC, Quebec, Ontario, we have our provincial societies, and those provincial societies support the local societies in carrying out programs and services. The local societies, Toronto, Peel, Hamilton, etc., they tend to provide more on the ground sort of client services, counseling, support groups, education, exercise programming, etc. But that doesn't mean the provincial society does nothing. So we do a lot of work ourselves. We do a lot of advocacy, a lot of campaigning, fundraising. We do support a lot of research at the Ontario level. So researchers will come to us for a letter of support or, in-kind sort of support that we offer. And we do actually offer some programs and services that can support caregivers. So we do have some exercise programs that we run. There's something called The Social that we're a part of as well. That's a respite program whereby people with dementia go to a local society for 3 hours of activation type services, and that gives their care partners and caregivers some 3 hours of respite. We also offer a ton of education for caregivers. We have an Alz Educate website, and on that website there's a lot of information on best practices, what to look for, signs and symptoms, caregiving support as well. We do have some clinical-based programs as well that support people with dementia and as well as their caregivers. So we do have some services. We have Minds in Motion. So it depends within the province and or country where you're situated and what your local Alzheimer's Society would be offering to you. But at the provincial level, we do a lot of educational work, fundraising for people with dementia and for caregivers as well. And we do have some programming, not as robust as the local societies, but some programming that provides respite.
It's great to know that there's multiple levels, and then good to know also how they all work in an interconnected way to support caregivers and also support the bigger picture when it comes to Alzheimer's and research. What are some of the supports and tools that you find that are available when it comes to caregivers working with loved ones that have Alzheimer's that are available that might be helpful?
And that's a big list. So within the Alzheimer's societies, we have support groups. I can't speak highly enough of these support groups. I've used them myself, even as a director with the Alzheimer's Society. I've gone to support groups and just listening to other people going through the same thing that you're going through, it certainly does make you feel less crazy. And it's certainly, you know, in those support groups, you form a sense of community, you commiserate, you exchange ideas and tips and things that can be helpful to you. There are a ton of resources on the web, on the internet as well, depending upon the stage you're at in the dementia journey. So some folks at the beginning stages of dementia journey may want more resources, the information, what to do, what to expect, how to talk to healthcare providers. Later on in the journey, you might want more self-care techniques and coping mechanisms, and how do you cope with, you know, all the changes that are happening, and, you know, and so we offer that information on our website, Alz Educate. The Alzheimer's Society of Canada offers that information on their website, and does each provincial society as well. So going on to any provincial society, looking at their resource list will give you some resources on how to cope, what to look for, caregiving tips and tricks to support oneself living with dementia. There's also different hospitals, Sunnybrook, Baycrest, CAMH has some information as well. I think even PHAC has some information as well. So there's a lot out there in sort of the dementia space around how to support yourself, self-care techniques. There's a lot of apps as well, a lot of apps that help caregivers in terms of supporting their loved one with dementia, like, you know, medication-wise, doctor's appointments, etc. And then there's some apps for caregivers specifically how to really do self-care. What does self-care look like? I tend to tell caregivers, because it's sort of when we think about supporting ourselves, it's hard, right? There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of, you know, where is the time? There's a lot of other emotions involved when we want to take a step away from our loved one and focus on us. But it's the most important thing that one can do, even if it's to find 5 minutes in the day, 5 minutes, and when you're in the bathroom, just 5 minutes to just check in with yourself and see how you're doing. Maintaining that relationship with yourself is crucial as you go through the different steps of the dementia journey. But there is a lot of resources out there, and more that are being developed. Every day there are more resources coming out around dementia awareness, dementia stigma reduction, and care tips for caregivers.
That's good to know, because I think at the beginning of any caregiver's journey, or maybe not at the beginning, maybe a little further along, there's that, what do I do? Where do I go for help? Where do I go for information about how to deal with what I'm dealing with? And it's good to know that there is actually a wealth of resources out there. So for anyone that's sort of in the beginning of their caregiving journey, we're very happy to be talking about those today. When we look at the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, they have outlined 10 priorities for dementia research. Overall, can you give us sort of a sense of what these are and how they might relate to caregivers?
I mean, I want to read out 10, but I don't think we have time for all of that. But I
Give us
guess
the highlights.
I'll point to a couple of them. So one of them is addressing stigma. So when we talk about dementia and dementia research, we really can't go, we can only go as far as the stigma will allow us to go. no matter what we do, no matter what we research, no matter what we find in our findings, if people are too scared to talk about dementia, it's kind of just, it just sits on a shelf. So addressing stigma is really important because I know dementia is still a very taboo kind of health condition, in the sense that if you say, oh, I have dementia in my family, people will sort of tend to not rally around you as much as
Mm.
another condition, right? And that can leave caregivers feeling very isolated and very alone on this journey, like no one understands them. So, for example, my father got dementia when I was in my late 20s, early late 20s, and no one in my world knew what dementia was, except that it wasn't something that you were really going to engage with, right? So that caused a lot of people to pull away from us.
Mm.
Very stigmatized. We couldn't really, reach out to people and say, hey, let's talk. I need help, something, right? So addressing stigma will help make the conversation a lot easier, more palpable for people, hopefully to build better connections. Another research priority is health systems capacity, which is super duper important because along the dementia journey, the caregiver tends to be the one that's taking on a lot of the health and medical burdens as well. As a person with dementia, their functionality begins to decrease, the caregiver needs increase. And the healthcare system is not necessarily built to manage that. And a lot of the work falls back on the caregiver. A lot of the work is on the shoulders of the caregiver in terms of doing things like making sure the medications are being taken on time, making sure that the person makes it to the doctor's office, and also the caregivers are looking out. Are there any changes cognitively, any changes physically that need to be addressed by a doctor? And sometimes what happens is doctors and healthcare clinicians they don't see caregivers as care partners or
Mm.
partners. So a partner in care and a care partner are one and the same. And sometimes doctors and healthcare providers don't necessarily understand that the care partner slash caregiver is really a partner in care for this person. Like they're the ones seeing it, they're the ones knowing the baseline, they're the ones noticing the changes. And to have that communication and that relationship with the caregiver and care partner is really, really important, not just for the person with dementia, obviously, but the caregiver slash care partner also, because it helps to decrease stress, it helps to provide clarity, it helps to provide access and make that journey a lot easier than otherwise being in the dark and everyone sort of in their own siloed ways of handling
Mm.
the person with dementia. Then I want to talk about non-drug approaches to managing symptoms. So we have these disease-modifying drugs in Canada that are most likely going to get passed and be in common use. But there are some non-drug approaches to managing symptoms for caregivers. Caregivers, we have a lot of stress. We have a lot of fluctuating moods, right? I tell everyone who's a caregiver, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through, it's 110% normal. This is a very arduous, very unpredictable journey at times. And so looking for predictability is probably not the easiest thing to do. But some non-drug approaches to managing some of those symptoms are things like meditation, are things like engaging with other people, social connections, networking, healthy eating, healthy living, healthy lifestyle. Focusing on therapy if need be, ways to really increase it's like social prescribing in a sense, but looking at ways to increase your emotional and cognitive reserves in a way that's healthy and sustained, because you're going to be drawing on those reserves throughout the journey and even thereafter. Um, what else can I talk about? Impact of early treatment. So one thing I do research in dementia in culturally diverse communities, and one thing I've seen in my research is that folks from culturally diverse communities tend to get diagnosed later in the trajectory. And when you get diagnosed late in the trajectory, what happens is that sometimes some therapies aren't as effective or would be effective if you got diagnosed earlier on in the journey. And all that, in addition to many other instances of having late diagnosis, there's an extra burden on the care partner, and an extra burden on the family and or community, right? Trying to understand what these changes are, what does it mean, how to get those right supports. So impact of early treatment is very significant when we're talking about access to the best therapies and medications were needed, but also getting access to information for the caregivers and care partners. Getting an early diagnosis and early treatment means you get to know more what's happening and what to look out for as changes occur. So you're not caught off guard and left in the dark. You can be more proactive in their care and in your ability to care for them and yourself.
Caregiving is a rewarding journey, but it can also be incredibly challenging. 90-Second Caregiver provides short, practical tips to help caregivers manage their stress. Whether it's a quick break, relaxation exercise, or a few minutes of self-care, the tips are designed to help you manage stress and maintain your mental health. 90-Second Caregiver delivers health information, tips, and advice related to the caregiving experience and caregiver mental health straight to your inbox each week. Take care of yourself. Subscribe to the 90-Second Caregiver at ontariocaregiver.ca.
I really want to dive into a little bit more in a moment about the why behind that last piece that you just said in terms of why diverse communities have that diagnosis later. And there's so much to talk about there. But before we get there, I wanted to talk about policy and what you feel there might be needed in terms of policy changes to better prioritize support for both people living with dementia and their caregivers. Is there a piece of the puzzle that is missing there?
Yeah, and I think we had some great news this year in the budget reading in the springtime, where the federal government said that they have every intention of creating a national caregiver strategy. And that was really led by the Canadian Center of Excellence under Liv Mendelsohn and James, really trying to put the needs of caregivers on the national stage, which is important, right? When we think about the work that caregivers do, I kind of liken it to like single moms as well. There's an enormous load, or single parents, let me say, there's an enormous load that is taken off the shoulders of the government and placed on individuals to ensure that people are not going to nursing or going to emergency rooms for, things that could be dealt with at home. That, we're investing in our families and our homes as opposed to long-term care homes or PSWs. So there's a lot that goes into supporting people living with dementia in this regard that's not necessarily incumbent on the state to provide. But to be able to do that, we do need better policies to enable our caregivers and our care partners to be able to support their loved ones and support themselves. So there are things like the Canada Caregiver Credit, as well as the disability tax credit, registered disability savings plan, and medical expenses for income taxes that should be modified to allow caregivers to be able to take time off and use these tax credits, use these benefits to enable them to have that time to care for their loved ones. We don't really have a good sort of leave of absence if you're a caregiver. We have a leave of absence if you have a baby, if you're chronically ill, but if you're taking care of somebody, especially for dementia, which can be a very long journey, there's not a really coordinated, cohesive employment kind of leave that's available to people. If you're maybe some companies offer that, but it's not standard, right? So thinking about our baby boomer population and how people are getting older, we're having a bigger chunk of people getting older in our country, which means that their kids or their relatives are kind of going to be the ones to take that on. But if they can't leave the workforce in such a way where they're going to be compensated well, what's going to happen? Long-term care, retirement, PSWs, and that's not always sustainable in terms of monetary, but also in terms of being able to provide, make sure that your loved one is safe and getting the right medical attention that they need. Also thinking about the way our care sort of labor industry is sort of organized. It's not very regulated, or PSWs, when I think about them, they're not very regulated. Even the education for PSWs is kind of a college offers a program. What's the standardization in terms of what they're being taught? And, it's almost like a patchwork quilt in my mind, just sort of a patch here, a patch there, a patch there. So ensuring that our formalized caregivers have the support that they need. They have a regulatory body for their profession. They have the education that is needed. And a lot of PSW training, from what I understand, dementia isn't a focal point. Meanwhile, a lot of PSWs end up in nursing homes, which have majority people living with dementia and their family members, right? So there's like a disconnect automatically built into that scheme, right? Compensation is also very much needed for our formalized caregivers. They're not making a lot of money, but we're expecting them to do so much, which is unfair, right? A lot of these formalized caregivers are also caring for their own loved ones in their own homes or their country back home, sending money back home for their loved ones. So I think ways to really acknowledge and recognize their work is really important as well. Though, and then when we think about home care and long-term care and better integrated care is very, very important. When we talk about dementia care from a medicalized perspective, we need better integrated care for sure. The left hand needs to know what the right hand is doing when it comes to someone living with dementia. Oftentimes there's a disconnect between the family doctor, the geriatrician, the neurologist, and it sort of becomes this sort of hodgepodge. No one really knows what's happening and not really talking to one another. Also thinking about investing back into long-term care. And we saw it with COVID, we saw what happened, and we see the continuing defunding of our healthcare system. It's not going to serve us well in the immediate or near future when we don't prioritize from a policy level some of these pieces.
And when I hear all of that, and when you take a step back and look at the big picture implications of all of those holes in policy, potentially, what I see is not only the lack of support for the patient, but the implications in terms of the financial and health repercussions for the caregiver. If they don't have the right financial support, if they're burning out, if that causes health problems for them. And then when we look at our population of PSWs and the burden that is on them constantly and the cycle there, it's really obvious that there are some things that need to be fixed, but it just requires really that big picture thinking to see how it doesn't just affect the patient, it affects the caregivers, it affects the workers that are supporting. So there's a lot to be done there. And I absolutely appreciate you highlighting all of those things, because I think it's really helpful for people to see where we sort of need to talk to our elected officials about what needs to be changed potentially going forward. I want to bring it back to something that we talked about before. You also teach. You teach undergrad students at York. That's also where I went to university, about the impact of social determinants of health on marginalized populations. And this brings us back to what we were talking about before. And I wanted to ask you, and you covered this a little bit already, what are some of the most striking disparities that you've observed personally and professionally in terms of dementia diagnosis for marginalized groups in Canada?
It's an answer that's wrapped up in a few things. So thinking about social determinants of health, which are the non-medical factors that influence your health status. So thinking about things like housing, employment, education, food security, those aren't biological, but they certainly do impact how you have better health and how long that better health can be maintained. And when I talk to some communities, they've said to me, we're not thinking about dementia right now. We need jobs. We need housing. We need food. We can't afford things. Like if someone's, losing their memory, that's for another day. We have to focus on other things. And that really is a direct relationship between social determinants of health and having the insecurity of housing, food, employment, etc., and how people are prioritizing what needs to be prioritized. Another reason that I've seen in literature and research as to why diverse communities get later diagnosis, there's a couple of reasons actually. One is a cultural sort of understanding of dementia as being a normal part of aging. It's like, oh, well, that's just grandma's getting old, it's fine type of thing. And dementia is not a normal part of aging. People think, well, you're getting up there, be prepared to lose your memory. No. There are some certainly genetic predispositions to getting dementia. And, the jury's still out on sort of really what is the cause of dementia. Is it all genetics, or is it all environmental, or a combination of both? But we do know that it's not a normal part of aging, but some cultural groups will feel that it is. So there's no need to get a diagnosis, because that's just the way life goes, right? In other cultural groups, the way dementia is not thought about from a medicalized perspective. We pathologize dementia as something negative and bad. Some groups do not. You do not see it as a negative, bad thing. It's just sort of circle of life, return to nature type of thing. Other communities might see dementia as something religiously, you've done something bad in a past life and you're paying for it now. So there's that sort of diminishing or dismissing of the medicalized nature of dementia, which again, talking about early treatment and early diagnosis. Some communities have a fear of the healthcare system, and getting diagnosis historically would mean that, okay, we're going to have more government intervention into our lives. Maybe we're going to have to be institutionalized. Maybe they're going to do some testing on this. So there's a fear of being treated unfairly, discriminatorily in the healthcare system. So they just don't engage altogether. They just wait and leave it alone until they need to go. Some folks have said to me that there's nothing culturally commiserate to them. It's like, well, there's nothing to do with me. It's not our culture. This isn't our culture. This is for, white Canadians. We don't see this in our culture. So there is that there's a lack of a bridge between what's happening in the Canadian Western context and the understanding in different communities as well. So there's a myriad of reasons as to why some communities don't immediately see it as a need. Some communities even don't even know what to look for. They wouldn't even know the signs and symptoms. Everyone thinks it's just memory loss. It's also that's also losing your way, like not being able to remember how you get home. It's also changes in personality. It's also changes in language and being able to communicate. It's changes in abstract thinking, forgetting to take a jacket to go outside when it's really cold. Other things are there that people may not even be aware of.
It brings me back to someone that we spoke to last season, I believe, where one woman was a caregiver for her father, who was fluent, I believe, in 3 languages. And when his dementia progressed, he reverted back to only his original language. And that ended up being, so that sort of that was something that was really challenging for them in terms of finding resources to speak to him as well in his original language. So, and even without that situation, like the cultural nuances of caregiving are things that come up over and over, whether it's language, whether it's religion, and so forth. So it's really important, especially in a country as diverse as Canada and in Ontario, where we're incredibly diverse, to sort of be addressing all of these things when it comes to the caregiving experience and the patient experience as well. How do you think, though, that perhaps healthcare professionals can improve cultural competency when diagnosing dementia in diverse populations?
I think, and I talked to some healthcare providers, and they all said the same thing to me. They say, I don't know what to do. And I tell people, you're not going to know everything about every culture in every instance. Culture is a very fluid concept, right? Like culture is a learned thing. And, you could be born in any country, maybe not an ethnic national of that country, but born in any country and adopt their culture. And that culture is going to change over time, right? As ideas become popular or not popular, culture changes. But I tell healthcare providers, talk to the family. Talk to the family and get a sense of what because cultures as well aren't a monolith. So people who are a part of a culture, they're not going to adopt every single aspect of that culture, but talk to the family and figure out what their loved one needs or understands from a cultural perspective. And I tell some healthcare providers, if you're really keen, read up yourself on the culture that maybe might be coming through your doors more. So if most of your patients or clients tend to be from a particular area, nothing wrong with looking up, what is dementia like, or what is seniors' health and seniors aging like? For some cultures, dementia is not a word that you talk about. You talk about seniors' health, you talk about brain health, you talk about, brain aging. So understanding what are some of the nuances, like broad strokes within a culture that might make things more palpable for, the clients and the patients to really engage with, right? I think that's where, a little bit of homework / recon is probably going to be more beneficial than not when talking to patients. And you're going to say, well, I don't know who the patients are before they come in. Granted, you don't know, but if and when there is some downtime, nothing wrong with looking it up to say, hey, I wonder what happens in this particular culture or country of origin and how things are treated there. They'd be surprised how many patients would be like, wow, a little bit about me. Wow, they're going to have, it's more of an open, the relationship takes on a different turn at that point.
Well, yeah, I mean, no professional, no person can be expected to know everything about everyone the moment they walk, but it's being open to having a dialogue about it. And it comes back to that piece about, working with the caregiver as well, especially if the caregiver is that person that is the resource for all the information. So that absolutely makes sense. Do you have any recommendations for improving communication between healthcare providers and patients who speak different languages or come from different cultural backgrounds? Or does it really come back sort of to that piece of like listening to the caregiver, doing a little bit of research if possible?
Yeah, and that's where I say we're making the move from cultural competency to cultural safety and cultural humility. We can be competent in a culture, but again, culture is always shifting. So what you're competent in, from circa 2015 may not hold now in 2024. And so when we think about cultural safety, that is where you really understand the culture, the historical, political, economic sort of understanding of the culture, especially in the Canadian context. So if I have clients who are from, I'm picking country, I don't know, Bolivia, whatever, someone from Bolivia, and that's my patient load, my client load. I'm going to find out more about Bolivians in Canada. I'm going to find out, where they're situated, what it's like, what the political, economic, social conditions are for them in Canada. How do Bolivians view aging and seniors' health in Bolivia and as well in Canada? Has there been some nuanced changes in the migration patterns over here? So the humility, so that's a cultural safety part, making it safe for different folks to feel they can bring their full selves to the conversation, to the consultation. The humility part is being humble and knowing that I'm not the expert in the room when it comes to somebody else's journey with dementia. They're the expert, and I have to defer to their expertise. And it's not about, egos and I know things. I will never know as much as someone who's living in their own truth. So, as the dialogue is now, the discourse now is holding space for that truth and holding space for somebody else to say, this is my experience, this is what I need. And humility is saying, okay, great, thank you. Let's work together. Let's work together and come to a middle ground where you can feel respected and dignified in your journey, and I can ensure that you're getting at least the information of what you need. If you want to take it up, that's up to you, but let's find a way we can meet in the middle and discuss these things. I think that cultural humility and safety is sort of the path to be on when it comes to supporting healthcare providers, supporting people with dementia and their caregivers.
That is absolutely the ideal, but should perhaps a caregiver find themselves not in an ideal situation where they feel that they have a healthcare system that doesn't always meet their needs, especially if they're from diverse backgrounds? Do you have any advice on what they should do or resources they could look for?
Yeah, so connecting with the local Alzheimer's societies, because we have staff, clinical staff that can help navigate the healthcare system, talking to doctors, knowing what to say, connecting with healthcare navigators. We do have healthcare navigators. They might cost some money to contact them, patient care navigators, excuse me, to contact them and say, this is what's happening with my loved one. I need some help. Connecting with, and this is where it gets a bit tricky, especially for people who might feel a bit isolated, connecting with different community members as well, who have gone through it or who might be able to advocate on your behalf. The Alzheimer's Society does advocate on behalf of people at the local level. The provincial level, we don't. I do personally. I contact people on behalf of other people, should they just feel absolutely like, I don't know what to do. But, you know, people who run day programs and who run support groups and counselors, they can help give loved ones the tools and the language, the vocabulary by which to talk with healthcare providers. I always say to people, if you need a second and third opinion, go get a second and third opinion. If you feel that you're not being respected, you're not being listened to by your healthcare provider, go and get a second opinion, 100%. Like don't languish and wait and be made to feel like something is or isn't happening when it is or isn't.
Specific to equity, diversity, and inclusion, do you see any particular holes in policy or research that need to be addressed?
Yeah, we don't have any. We
That'll
don't
do it. Yeah.
When I think about dementia research in Canada on equity deserving groups, and not just ethno-racial groups, I'm talking differently abled, I'm talking language minority, religious minority, you know, I'm talking neurodiverse populations. We don't have a lot of research. We don't know. And we don't know what we don't know. Policymakers, they want numbers, they want evidence-based information before they make a policy, rightfully so. But when we don't have that research to begin with, we're starting off in the negative in the race, right? So right now we have the National Dementia Strategy, which talks to ethno-racial groups, diversity, etc., not in explicit detail. That in itself is the gap, right? Without that strong guiding ideas and advice, a lot of providers are going to be like, well, I don't know, I don't really know what to do. Some provinces have dementia strategies, but again, it doesn't speak to equity seeking populations. And the assumption that we all just sort of experience dementia in the same way is absolutely false. Dementia does not discriminate at all, but the way dementia is experienced is discriminatory. So some folks have a much harder time, some communities have a much harder time than other communities. And without acknowledging that and calling that as true, we're going to have this disproportionate burden in society where some groups are just doing so poorly compared to other groups. Now, those groups are still going to need some services. They're still going to need support. They're going to be in the emergency room more. They're going to be looking about for PSWs, housing, food, you know, anything. And that, you know, from an economic point of view, that's going to cause a bit more strain on the government. So why not be proactive and develop policy strategies, approaches to kind of understand that but understand that there are different segments of society that are going to have unique needs. For example, I think about newcomers to Canada. So newcomers, most newcomers tend to be younger age, like 20 to 30, 40, 50, though we are seeing a little bit more folks coming in over the age of 65 these days. But for the most part, newcomer populations in the past 10 years are relatively young. However, they are supporting their loved ones back home who might have dementia, might be experiencing something. What information do we have to give to them, right? When we think about our aging population, you know, we have an upswing in seniors, people over 65. I think it's like 7 million people now, as per the last Canadian census. And that's significant in terms of our Canadian history. Since 2016, we've been seeing people over 65 really reaching these high numbers according to our census. And we don't have the population 0 to 14 being born to support it, right? And we're getting a lot more diverse people coming in. 1 out of every 5 now claims another country of origin other than Canada. So these two intersecting together, they're going to have unique needs. Like as you were talking about, people reverting back to their language of origin as they get further on in the dementia journey. And they also revert back to ways of being from when they were younger. So then how do we support those individuals and their care partners and their community with all of the changes that dementia brings? So policies to really address and understand the uniqueness of the different equity seeking groups is going to be more advantageous for Canada than doing this reactive kind of, oh my God, we need this, oh my God, we need to get that we're currently seeing now. And that involves research. We need to fund research you know, for equity seeking groups, but research done by people from that community for their community.
I always like to think of the sort of the sports analogy of play where the ball is going, not where the ball is. We need to play where the ball is going. I mean, the ball, it's already there, but we need to have that foresight of where our population is going and what the needs will be so that we have the capacity to deal with the situation that is evolving, right? Not just deal with the now. And we're not even dealing with the now potentially as well, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
there's lots to think about there. If I may, I wanted to bring it back a little bit more to a personal side of this story for you, and your experience as a caregiver for your father. Can you tell us a little bit about him and what your experience has been like in terms of accessing quality care for him?
If I'm being completely honest, I probably saw signs of cognitive decline like a good 10, 12 years before he was diagnosed formally.
Okay.
Um, my father and I, we were very much kindred spirits, he and I. I actually, it's funny, I did a TED Talk in February that got released just a couple weeks ago. And my girlfriend said to me, she said, the way you talk about your dad, it's so profound. And I said, yeah, growing up, he was my literal best friend. I used to come to him with boy problems and, problems with my brothers and all these things. And he always listened and was very kind and loving. And so I began noticing things probably in the 90s. And then my mom passed away in 2000, and he went into a very deep depression. And when we think about risk factors for dementia, depression and stress are up there, right?
Mhm.
And then a few years after that, she passed away. He met my stepmom, but I noticed some significant changes in him, like just acting completely out of character, mood switches very significantly. Like, when I thought, oh, maybe he's still grieving. But it was when we were outside, we went out one day to dinner, my brother and my dad, my brothers and I, and my dad saw someone in the parking lot that he thought he recognized. And he made a beeline for this person and said, oh, excuse me, aren't you so and so? And the man was like, what is happening? And I said, I'm so sorry. So sorry. I'm like, Dad. And he's like, oh, I thought it was so and so. And I thought, that's not you at all. And so get diagnosed, and the doctor, I was working in the hospital at the time, and I knew the doctor, so the doctor pulled me aside at work and said, your dad has Alzheimer's. You think it's Alzheimer's? And I was like, okay, I don't know what that means or what to do with
Yeah.
that. And initially someone said to me, this is like back in 2007, 8. Someone said to me, oh, take your dad to the Alzheimer's Society. And at the time I said, it's full of older white people. That's not going to help. That's not going to help my dad or my community. But that's all I knew of the Alzheimer's Society. I never saw anyone on any of the pamphlets or any of the, the media stuff that looked like my father or anybody of color, anybody. It was all mainly older white Canadian. So I thought, how is it going to help us, right? So we struggled and stumbled along, and like I said, there was stigma in our community, so no one really believed us when I said he's got dementia. No, he doesn't. He's just old. He's fine. And that was really, really isolating. We were young, my brothers and I, and none of our uh, peers understood. So we were caregivers at a very young age, completely lost in this brand new world, didn't know what to do, what to expect. And it was a very bumpy road, very, very bumpy road. And we needed to come up quickly on information, right? Accessing care we were fortunate in the sense that I worked for the hospital, so I was able to navigate and find which geriatrician would be good for my dad, which doctors, and all the rest of it. But even then, with that information that I had, I was still lost completely. I didn't know who to call if the doctor wasn't ready. What does CCAC stand for? Our CCAC workers not here. It was a minefield. I think the biggest issue was the day programs and at-home PSW care. The day programs, from a cultural perspective, they didn't know about how to support him as he was getting on the disease. He was reverting back to his Nigerian ways, like when he was a kid. So I would get phone calls from them. Your dad's doing this, and what does this mean? And your dad did this yesterday. What does that mean? And I'm having to, tell them, and this means that, this means that. They're like, oh, okay. And again, you don't know what you don't know, and it's very hard to know everything. So I do appreciate them calling me and asking me what was happening so I could guide them through. So they could respond and feel competent, and my dad could feel safe and secure. The PSWs was challenging as well. Because there are programs, I don't know if there are now, but there are programs that would give respite hours, subsidized respite hours. But I think at the time we got like 20 hours a month. So divide up 20 free hours a month. And how do you
Right.
how do you navigate that in a given week, right? And they have these set hours, right? Come between 4 and 5. Well, if your loved one's already eaten at 3, you've already changed them and they're in bed, and the PSW shows up at 4, not kind of much for them to do, right? Those instances were difficult. I think during COVID, when COVID came and he got worse, like so many other people living with dementia, they got worse cognitively and socially. And we went to the hospital a couple of times, and that was just a minefield trying to navigate um, the directives of the hospital that were very much not in alignment with my directives or what I would want as a loved one for my father. No one's going to come out right and tell you that they have these biases against you. But, as like, for example, as a woman, someone may not be sexist outrightly towards me, but I can feel that sexism. I can feel that danger. Um, and I felt that within the healthcare system with my father. Without people saying it, I felt something was amiss. And, you go into advocacy mode. You go into
Sure.
protective advocacy mode. And that takes away from being able to be there, I think, for your loved one, like to enjoy their time and to enjoy your time with them, because you don't know how much time you have. You spend all this time fighting a system that is broken and fighting against healthcare providers who are also overworked, overwhelmed, under-resourced, underpaid, and they themselves aren't being supported by certain policies and directives, right? It's down back to the family when they're also trying to access services and get help. Um, I won't go into detail about what happened with my father 2.5 years ago, but so when someone older goes into the hospital, someone's older and they're frail and they're going in with a condition, there's a really quick and almost immediate conversation around DNR.
Yeah.
Do you need a DNR? Do you have a DNR? What about a DNR? Have you thought about a
Mhm.
DNR? And some families really appreciate that, and yes, but a lot of other families don't. And, when I talk to my friends from all walks of life, they say, in our custom, you don't talk about death preventative, like, quickly, because if you talk about death quickly, you're kind of wishing it upon your loved one, you know what I mean? And that cultural piece is completely negated in our healthcare system. Because like when we were growing up, you don't bring up death because it's almost like you're cursing your parent, right? You don't bring it up. But I know in the healthcare system, you have to think about what the care goals are, and that to make it easier for the loved one and I guess the healthcare system. But I did notice this conversation around DNR almost exclusively, which, put me in mama bear mode, like, let's treat him first, and then we can talk about that. And I think that is a feature of COVID, from what I understand. And I think it's a feature that I hear of more and more, and I see myself personally with my dad, when seniors go into our healthcare system. It's almost this immediate conversation around that, which I think certainly takes away from the family, and the person with dementia. They sort of become expendable and more like an object than an actual person, which I think is just absolutely heartbreaking.
It is. And then, if there's layers of bias that you're dealing with from that you're perceiving from the healthcare system that you're feeling that are there, it also puts you in an extra state of hypervigilance on top of what you're already feeling as a caregiver. You know what I mean? It's those layers, and it's hard, like you said, to enjoy your loved one while they're here if you're always in that state and dealing with all of that, and also for your own life. and we're talking about personal care for yourself, do you find that you have struck a balance between your personal life and caregiving and taking time for yourself? Do you have any advice for other caregivers on that?
Don't do what I do is first bit of advice. No, it's significantly hard, I think, to take time for myself. I think for most caregivers, it's hard. You know, there's the physical aspect of caregiving when you're doing the actual duties, right? Changing, cleaning, washing, feeding, uh, providing, changing. Like for me, myself, for example, I change my dad, I wash him. He gets fed by G-tube, but I change his wound dressings. I check his body for sores. I take his vitals. I do all this. It's hard for me to just sit there and be with him as his daughter. And you are in a state of, your nervous system is hyper aroused all the time. Looking out for the what's next, something happened, because the reliance on the healthcare system, once upon a time, it's not as it should be, or as it was before. So for me, self-care, and I try to be more intentful about my self-care. So I try to get home at a good hour, right? Try to shower, have a cup of tea, and sort of bring my nervous system back into regulation. I work with a great team that also urges me to take time in self-care. A lot of it also is the guilt you would feel sometimes. Part of the caregiving journey is a lot of guilt and this feeling of, well, I can't, I have to take care of them. But it's telling yourself you have to take care of yourself as well, and sort of letting go a little bit, right? Like people they feel very tense when their loved one goes to the hospital or when they're sick. And it's an element of letting go a little bit, just to let go, right? I don't know what's going to happen as you let go, and we're all terrified, but if you are also in the hospital, no one's taking care of your loved one. And so I tell people, before you do any kind of act of self-care, you sort of have to do a mental process, that it's allowing yourself to take care of yourself and not feel guilty. I think when you can have that thought process sort of down packed, the action, whatever you want to take, be it a bath for 20 minutes or a shopping spree or going to the gym or going on vacation, whatever it is, that will feel less guilty. You can actually enjoy and be present in those activities. So I think it's first a mental capacity of, it's okay to let go. It's okay to take care of yourself. Someone said to me, my dad's doctor said to me that you've done all you can. What happens here on in is the dementia. So telling myself, I've done all I can. I need to rest for a minute. And things can get very, very hectic for very, very many reasons. And a lot of feelings come up around that. I encourage people to rest. Caregivers are actually they're at an increased rate for getting dementia themselves because of all the stress. Of caregiving.
Yeah.
You're at an increased rate for getting dementia yourself. So it kind of like, I think to myself, if I stress myself out to the point of I get really sick, the question I will ask myself will be, what was the point of all of this? What was the point of doing everything to take care of my dad and make sure he's okay, only for me to get sick in the end and I can't enjoy life? What was the point of all that? So it's almost like, did I do all that for nothing? Just for me to get sick in the end. So those kinds of thoughts sort of guide me into finding moments of care and of respite.
Do you need more resources to help you on your caregiving journey? The Ontario Caregiver Organization Online Learning Library is here to help. With 24/7 access to quality education and training, our learning library is the perfect way to upskill and gain the knowledge you need to provide the best possible care. With an abundance of online courses, videos, and other training materials, you can learn at your own pace and on your own time. Get started today and unlock the potential of becoming a more confident caregiver with the Ontario Caregiver Organization Online Learning Library. Visit ontariocaregiver.ca for more information. That's ontariocaregiver.ca for more information.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's very helpful for all of us to sort of come back to that point about self-care when caregiving. And it's not this sort of, sometimes the whole concept of taking care of yourself feels a little bit superficial, or the way maybe it's portrayed out in the world, but it's so critical to the caregiver's well-being in order to do that, to ensure that. Do you have any moments along your caregiving journey, or any memories that have been really moving for you, or surprising, or like just were something that was really unexpected, perhaps in a very delightful way, or anything else?
Yeah. I mean, and there's so many. I often thought before that, it's all going to be a downhill journey, but I always say that there's beauty in everything, and the dementia journey is hard. And I'll be very, from my experience, I know other people may not feel this way, or some may, or they may not want to um actually admit it to themselves, but dementia is hard, and it's sad, and it's terrifying, and it's gross, and a lot of days I hate it, to be completely honest. And I feel that naming those emotions is important. I don't want to keep it in my body. But in all of that, though, there are some beautiful, beautiful moments of peace and tranquility and love and just almost like a light at the end of the tunnel. Not a light that things are going to change or revert back, but a light that it's going to be okay. Like my brothers and I have gotten closer. Some family dynamics, dementia is in the family, and then the family splinters. And, people feel like you're not helping me, and you only care about mom or dad's money, and blah, blah, blah. And my brothers and I, we worked really hard to keep our relationship. My stepmom, she has it's a joy actually to watch my stepmom when she comes into the room. She'll start talking. My dad will hear her voice. My dad's nonverbal right now. So he'll hear her voice, and you'll see him go, trying to connect with her. And he moves his body and tries to move himself towards her when she walks in the room. So seeing that display of love, even while he's in this state, I think is incredible and beautiful to see. My moments with my dad, and remember, he was in the hospital a couple of years ago, and he was on life support, and they're like, oh, he's not going to make it. And I thought, I said, let God handle that one. So I went into the room and I was playing some Motown. I said, Daddy, you like Motown? So I was doing I called it dance party, he and I. So I would take his arm and say, Daddy, let's have dance party. And then I would drop his arm, and he would still keep moving his arm to Motown, to Al Green and all the rest of it. And, moments when I'll say, Daddy, do you love me? And he'll say, yeah, and they're beautiful moments. And for me, it's a part of just acknowledging him as who he is and who he was, acknowledging me for who I am and who I was and who I'm going to be. And sort of, I guess, like when you're swimming in the murkiness, trying to open up through that murkiness, swim through the murkiness, and find some clear waters where I can be with my dad as his daughter, and love him as his daughter, and care for him as his daughter. I've seen extended family members come around like, oh, Ngozi, he does have dementia, we're sorry, and rebuild those relationships. I find now, because my family was my parents were older than my other friends' parents. So now their parents are, having some issues, and we sort of commiserate more together and support one another. An unintended consequence of this journey is that I've found myself supporting other people. When they say when you're going through something, help somebody else. And I do that. And it gives me a sense of calm, a sense of my father would have wanted this to help others. But there are some moments where, it's delightful when he laughs about something that he's thinking about, and I take pictures and I laugh with him. And just being there with him, there's a calmness and a presence and a peace that I can't explain, that I have tapped into when I'm with him. Because there's many things to be angry about on this journey. You could argue and say fewer things to be positive about than there are more things to be angry about, but maybe at this stage, I'm leaning more into, even if it's a few things to be positive about. to get through. And it's hard. I say that after being on this journey for 18 years. So I run the gambit of the yay, no, there's been all of that. But now it's to a point of acceptance as much as I can, and love and peace as much as I can. And I think for everyone who goes through it when their loved one, because we went through the stage where daddy's wandering, we can't bring him back to the house. He's getting a touch bit aggressive at home. He's not sleeping and he's always up all night. And in those moments, like, where's the positive? I haven't slept in 2 days. I haven't showered in 4. I don't know where my keys are. Where's the positive in all of this? And I tell people, you can still find some when they're calm and when they want to engage with you. And, every instance of this journey changes. Know what to expect, so that helps you feel more empowered and can give you that sense of calm. But there are some beautiful moments in this as well.
Would the advice that you would give to your younger self 17, 18 years ago be to look for those moments, or is there anything else that you would want to go back and tell yourself or anyone on the beginning of this journey as a caregiver?
It's funny. I am going to say in the TED Talk I did, it talks just about that. I wrote a letter to myself that I read out loud, things I could say to my younger self. One thing I will say is everyone, if I was younger, I would say everyone's going to grieve about this differently. I would tell myself, give yourself space and room and time to grieve this. Dementia is certainly a disease of mourning, and give yourself time to mourn whenever you want to mourn and whenever you need to mourn, as you need to mourn it. Because I think being pent up and trying to be stoic and get through is not helpful. Find people who can support you, which can be difficult, right? Because it's like, no one talks about dementia. It's, it's for old people. But, the support groups and branch out. And I talk very openly about my journey and my dad's condition because I want to destigmatize the disease and also to meet other people who are in the same boat, because I'm still in it. I'm still actively providing care. I say, be patient with yourself. My God, be patient with yourself. Do not think you're going to get it right. You're going to get it wrong. You will get it wrong. I saw a clip today. Someone said, you think you're choosing the right decision. Just make a decision and then make it right for you. Because there's always advantages and disadvantages to every decision that you make. So don't think that with regards to dementia, especially, I'm doing the right thing. It's going to be right all the time. No, it's not. And don't try to feel guilty if it's not, when it's not. Don't try to shame yourself. I should have known better. You don't know what you don't know. And there's no real blueprint for dementia. Everyone who has dementia is a person who has dementia. It's a very individualized disease. So be very kind and very gracious with yourself. Have patience and as much love for yourself as you do for other people. I found that the love I have for my dad has grown like exponentially. I never knew that my heart could be this big and this full of love for him. I never even thought it was something it wasn't on my radar of existence, but the love I have for that man right now is almost insurmountable. And allowing myself to be a person in all of this, because the healthcare system's coming at you, the social system's coming at you, sometimes legal and taxes and all that's coming at you. And you can find it hard to be yourself throughout all of it, to remember, I am me, and I can only do this as me. And really honoring that and allowing yourself to be you through this journey is probably the best advice that I would have given my younger self had I known.
So Ngozi, if we have caregivers that are listening today that are looking for resources and support for themselves and their loved ones that may have dementia or Alzheimer's, where do you suggest that they go?
Yeah, so the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario, so this is like province-wide. We do have a program called First Link. And First Link is a program that you can call into and say, my loved one has dementia, or I think I might be getting dementia. And from this First Link, they actually connect you to one-on-one counseling or group support. They can help refer you to local healthcare providers and community services, help you meet other people in similar circumstances. And they can also help you plan sort of what you would need to know for the dementia journey, and also, get you involved with Alzheimer's Society programs and activities as well. So it's kind of like a gateway into the dementia space and the dementia world, but with a helping hand to help you understand and navigate and guide you through. So it's called First Link. So upon getting a diagnosis or thinking there might be a diagnosis needed, I always say connect with firstlinkontario.ca or your local Alzheimer's Society and ask for the First Link program to get you started.
That is very good advice. And it's all very good advice, everything you've said. Ngozi, it's been really so lovely to speak to you today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I thank you so much for being on the show. I know a lot of caregivers are going to, feel seen and heard and see points in your story and then your professional expertise that will be helpful to them.
What I know now, if I had known even a fifth of this stuff when I started my journey, things would have been different, right? And coulda, woulda, shoulda, we all know is not the way to go in life. But, it's at a point now where I just feel like, it's very cliche. If someone could just take away one thing from this, it would make all the difference in the world. But it's true. If someone says, hey, that resonates, like that makes sense to me, then if it can make someone's journey easier, it really does matter.
It does. And that means that we've done a good job today with what we've done. We've had a great conversation, and we've also, if we've made a difference and you've made a difference specifically, I think that's exactly what we were hoping to do. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can access more details and support services on our website, ontariocaregiver.ca. Until next time, I'm Michelle Jobin, and you've been listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. We hope you have a wonderful day.